To enable Azure SQL Active Directory authentication, start by understanding the concept of Active Directory authentication, which allows users to connect to Azure SQL Database using their Azure Active Directory credentials. This method provides an alternative to traditional SQL Server authentication and offers several benefits, including improved security and ease of management. First, ensure you have an Azure Active Directory set up and configured. If you don't have one, create a new Azure Active Directory tenant and add users to it. Next, create an Azure SQL Database instance and ensure it is linked to your Azure Active Directory tenant. To enable Active Directory authentication, navigate to the Azure portal and select your Azure SQL Database instance. Click on Active Directory Admin and then click on Set Admin. Here, you can select the Azure Active Directory you want to use for authentication. Choose the desired Azure Active Directory and click Save. After enabling Active Directory authentication, you need to create a contained database user in your Azure SQL Database. To do this, connect to your Azure SQL Database using a tool like SQL Server Management Studio or Azure Data Studio. Run the following command to create a new contained database user, replacing your domain and username with your actual Azure Active Directory domain and username. Create your username from external provider. Once you have created the contained database user, you can connect to your Azure SQL Database using Active Directory authentication. To do this, use a connection string that includes the authentication keyword set to Active Directory password or Active Directory integrated. For example, if you are using SQL Server Management Studio, you can select Active Directory password from the Authentication drop-down menu and enter your Azure Active Directory username and password. Best practices for using Azure SQL Active Directory authentication include using least privilege access, where users have only the necessary permissions to perform their tasks. You should also use Azure Active Directory groups to manage access to your Azure SQL database, rather than individual user accounts. Additionally, ensure that you have a robust password policy in place and that users are required to use multi-factor authentication when connecting to your Azure SQL database. By following these steps and best practices, you can enable Azure SQL Active Directory authentication for your Azure SQL database instance, providing a more secure and manageable way to authenticate users.